Hey, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Awesome to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking this time.
Thanks for having me.
I put the glasses on because I realized I had forgotten, but I'll do a quick intro of myself and then we'll turn it over to you for your intro. Does that sound good?
Sounds perfect.
All right. So, welcome to Founder Design Thinking podcast episode number 27. I'm Jay Z and I'm a product manager. I'm actually going to pivot this podcast towards generative AI video only. And so anyone who wants to speak or know someone who works at those companies, let me know. But the reason I mentioned that is because, Tom and I were just discussing video editing, and his voice, as you know, is like a beautiful British accent. And I was just telling him that I thought it was an digital fake that I could choose, but it's like his real voice. So I think this is the double treat for everyone in the audience. You get to hear about his game consultancy with his real non-AI British accent. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you. What an awesome intro. Yeah, so all you need to do is live in England for like 40 years and then you can have an English accent too.
Wow.
So yes, my name's Tom. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It sounds like I've snuck in right in time to talk about gaming before you pivot away to video. So yes, my background, my history is I guess when I first started my career, it was kind of like insight based, like trying to understand why people behave the way they do. And over time, I kind of moved closer and closer to product. I realized that what I really wanted to be doing is applying those insights, those hard won like insights that people collect, actually to the product itself. And I was able to make that transition from insight type roles to product type roles when I worked at King, which is the company that makes Candy Crush. So I was there for about 7 years. I joined just before Candy Soda launched, which was like at the time we thought of it as Candy 2. It's kind of like the follow-up game. And I worked a lot on the Candy franchise, and I also worked a lot in experimentation, which is where my kind of like career path has taken me now. So about, I think 2 weeks ago tomorrow, actually. So it's pretty early days. I launched a business called the Experimentation Group with my former boss, David Nelson, and another kind of podcasting like name in the gaming world called Philip Black, who is a regular host on a podcast called Deconstructor of Fun, which if you're into gaming, mobile gaming, you probably would have heard of that. And yeah, together we are trying to apply science to mobile gaming.
Wow, that's amazing. And congratulations. That's a big, big pivot. So that's really exciting. Thanks for launching it with us here on this podcast.
No worries. I mean, when we first started speaking about this, like it was pre-launch and it was all like super hectic. And so it's quite nice timing that we were able to get this slot in just a couple of weeks after we've gone live and things have really started to move.
Yeah, I think, founders need to support founders, right? We know about all the changes and roller coasters, and I really like helping people
Yeah.
as they get started, as you've helped me. And we have this LinkedIn user who's saying, this is my first live podcast experience. So for all of you out there who are doing, attending live on LinkedIn for the first time, please let us know where you're dialing in from. And, throughout, let us know any questions. But I'm curious, like, who else is attending live for the first time? I've done like 40 of these, but I think I'm like one of the few people who doesn't just record a podcast, who like goes live. So audience interaction, please. Tom, so tell us about the free component of your launch.
For sure. Yeah. So this is kind of this is one of the interesting things about our company, and I think why we've got so much traction so quickly is that we have decided to offer our services for free. So which kind of maybe feels a little bit counterintuitive. But we strongly believe in the power of science to bring growth to gaming. And actually, to be honest, like long term, I think there's no reason why this wouldn't also apply to any B2C app. So it's quite a good kind of case study for anybody that works in digital apps to think about. But when David and I worked at King, David founded something called the Experimentation Group, which is where we got the name from for this company, on the premise that we could be more successful as a business or like as a team by optimizing the games you already had rather than building a new game from scratch. And so what he set out to do was understand, like try and get to the core of what really motivates and engages players in a game, and then kind of build on top of that rather than kind of shooting aimlessly as we were doing or going off gut feel or copying what other people were doing. It was like, how can we get to the nub of what really matters to players? And we did that by applying a scientific method, which is effectively starting with a hypothesis about what you think matters, and then doing a quick test, like try and get something really small out in a couple of weeks, put it in front of players and see how they react. The first example of this, I mean, it really helps that the first thing that we did in the experimentation group wasn't just a massive success, and now is a kind of like staple in mobile gaming space, is something called hard level labeling. So if you've played a casual game, and in particular like a match 3 game like Candy Crush, you probably would have noticed that every few levels you get one which says this is hard. And the idea of that was to provide a bit of context, I guess, to players. So one thing we knew for sure was that the thing which people cared about most was levels. Like in the whole experience, people would love to crush the candies and make the matches and pass the level and then continue along the saga map. But the one thing that or I guess the basis of the hypothesis was that it was a very abstract experience. Like, what was the difference between being on level 40 and on level 400? Like, what really had changed? And what's the difference between the level you're on now and the level that you're on next? And so the idea was to kind of bring a bit of granularity to the experience by calling out there were levels which we knew statistically took more attempts to pass. And all we changed was, I'm saying we, I mean the royal we in terms of the experimentation group. It was obviously like a team thing. All that was changed was just putting this big like hard level bit of UI on the kind of modal that appeared before the level started, and it just created like a double digit, like a massive revenue uplift, which since it launched, which probably would have been about 8 years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, probably would have generated like about around roughly about $1 billion for King. And
Wow.
and then you multiply that across all the other games that have taken the same approach. And I guess I feel like I've been talking for ages now, but I guess the thing which is most interesting about that is that what that did was give a kind of like a kernel of insight to the team, where they will be able to say like, now we understand, or now we've got this idea that people want, or people are looking for some kind of goals, basically. So what we saw was people were looking forward and being like, oh, look, I've got a hard level coming up. And so we started to riff on that idea of giving people goals, like something to work towards, to introduce features around that. And it was just like, it was a crazy success. It kind of spawned loads of other experiments. And so we just want to take that knowledge and share it with people of how to do that.
That's amazing, because you have this comment here. Someone is on their first LinkedIn Live with us right now, and they're a fan of yours, Tom. So
right.
You're already super famous.
Yeah, come on. Nice to meet you.
After $1 billion of revenue, I'm not surprised that you're super famous. I guess for the audience, comment if this is your first live, but also comment if you ever played a game that's marked hard or a level that's marked hard. I think that's a really interesting personal, emotional connection. So are you thinking that for gamers who've done this in a while, like they've played games a lot, then the hard is something that they'll pay money to keep playing? Or how did, tell me about like the problem that you started with and how you came up with this hard solution.
Well, so that solution itself came from I guess the kind of the reflection that let me rewind a little bit. So I guess the innovation that Candy Crush as a game brought to the market, like it's obviously kind of like a phenomenon now. It's like part of the furniture almost. Like the mobile game's been out for 10 years. It's been like banking $1 billion plus for every year for those 10 years. Like it's done incredibly well. And it benefited from a couple of things. So number one, it was almost in the right place at the right time. So the game King as a company had existed for a decade before. So there'd been a lot of kind of like classic pivoting and building and testing and learning until it arrived at this game, which is Candy Crush, which kind of hit a sweet spot at just the right time. And so I guess the innovation that started the elevation was the Saga map. So, which is the kind of the thing which adds a little bit more context to just playing levels over and over again. Because if you've ever played Bejeweled, Candy Crush and Bejeweled are quite similar experiences. But what Candy Crush has is like once you've finished level 1, then you go to level 2. And so as a player, you're like, oh, I've progressed, I've got a bit better, and things kind of evolve that way. And the other thing it benefited from is that it kind of launched just as Facebook came out. And so the game was put on Facebook, and because it had that massive audience, like there was lots of eyeballs to point at it. And then very shortly after that, mobile gaming started to be a thing. And so it was ported to mobile, and the curve just like went up just crazy. And so it was kind of at the right place at the right time. But what hard level labeling did was to kind of add a step more context to that. So to take those, I think there's 15,000 levels now, but like to take all those levels,
wow,
but to add little steps in there and little goals for somebody to work towards, and I guess that the point about experimentation is that I guess that one of the key things there was that it was such a small slice, right? Like it was taking one idea and we shipped the experiment in 2 weeks. And so if it hadn't have worked, we would have learned, well, we did think that we needed to put more context in, but either that's not true or our stimulus didn't hit the mark. But we would have learned that quickly. We would have been able to iterate and move on. The fact that it works so well obviously kind of put a bit of kind of like politically within the company that the team was able to kind of expand their resources, I guess, and kind of gain a bit of clout. But also it gave a stepping stone to build on. And so there were like tons more experiments after that where we were able to kind of iterate and learn. And in fact, one of the experiments that we did was to take the Saga map away. So the thing which I just mentioned as like being the key of the Candy success, like internally at the company, the like received wisdom was that this was like the special sauce that made all the King games so special. And so we tested it. We took the Saga map away from a game, and it was a really spicy thing to do. Like we had a meeting where one of the guys in charge of the game just completely lost his mind, this is going to kill the game. There's no way we should do this. Retention is going to go to 0. Like, it was genuinely, we were kind of like looking at each other like, is this guy for real? Like, it's definitely, retention will not go to 0. Like, somebody will still play the game. And we did it. And retention dipped, like it was about 5%. But what that showed us was the Saga map, it wasn't the kind of be all and end all of everything. And you can kind of see that now reflected in lots of other games, like all the scapes games, Homescapes, Gardenscapes, Royal Match. They've all kind of innovated on that Saga in a way that I don't know whether it was directly related to that experiment, but we certainly had that insight where we could have innovated harder in that space.
So I'm going to try to translate, because I'm not a gamer, but I love games. So I love games in terms of what it can mean for growth hacking and product management. And so you're saying that for the hard level, you were able to upsell some kind of weapon or something to keep the user playing longer. Can you just clarify, like, what was the upsell and the monetization?
Well, there was actually nothing directly in there, as there was a hypothesis at the time that potentially, so we had a kind of single digit percentage of people that would pay in the game, so it was quite low of all the people. You can theoretically play Candy Crush all the way to the end without paying any money, but your progress is sped up obviously if you're prepared to spend. And the percentage of people that do spend, or at least when I was there, was kind of quite low. It was like in the single digits. And so there was obviously always the question of like, how do we make that bigger? And there was a hypothesis that by flagging levels as hard, that might give people permission to spend. Like the primary thing that you spend on in Candy Crush is, if you can imagine, you have a level and the challenge might be crush 20 red candies, and you've got 10 moves to do it in, and you use all your 10 moves and you've crushed 18 red candies, so you haven't passed. But what people spend most on is you then have the opportunity to spend money to buy extra moves. So there's
Extra
a kind
crushes.
Exactly right, extra crushes. And so there was a hypothesis that by saying this is a hard level, it might kind of give people permission to say, all right, then I'll just spend. If you see what I mean, like, because they've been told you failed, like you haven't passed it, but that's because it's hard, then potentially because they felt like, oh, but I'm so close, I'm just going to spend that 79p to get past, that might happen. But actually in the event, what we saw was spending was increased across the whole, like every level, every type of level. And so that wasn't the effect at all. It wasn't about giving permission. It was about kind of giving like goals, like context through the Saga map, giving people something to kind of shoot for and keep them engaged in the game, like either to continue to play that level, or some people like enjoy the hard level. So it was like, I want to get to that bit, get to level 78 because that's the hard level and I want to challenge myself.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and they see one of your posts goes viral and they're like, you want to boost that to 10x the reach? And I'm like, yes. So I think that's what you're saying, is that at that point where you've got some success, like you've got like 7 out of 10 red candies crushed.
Yeah.
You're like, yes, I would pay more to get the rest, right?
Exactly.
And that builds the habit of continuing to pay, not just at that level, but you're saying throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's goals. Like, goals are so important, just by giving somebody something to shoot for, saying like, this is important, or you're at level 2, this is level 3. It just gives that bit of context where a user could be a player of a game or a user of an app. Like, you see it in profiles a lot, don't you? Your profile is 70% complete. I want to get to 100%. Like, what are the things that I need to do to finish it off? Like, it's kind of setting that expectation of like, this is the thing to shoot for next.
Got it. And, you know, anyone in the audience, if you have questions about that, please comment them now. I'm going to keep asking you. So in terms of the saga map, that's where the experimentation also kind of challenged the status quo. So of course you're going to have someone in the company who's like, oh, that's like our only differentiation, or that's, you know, how we got so successful. We have to keep that. And you were able to launch an experiment that showed that there was a 5% dip or a 5% contribution from the saga map. So then you were able to change the direction of the games that were designed after that to not always be dependent on the saga map. So can you tell us a little bit about, just like one sentence, what the saga map is and how future games diverged from the saga map?
So the saga map, if you can imagine, right, like there are, like I said, there's, so say when Candy Crush launched, there was like 50 levels. And so what the saga map is like a visual representation of that. So you've got like a screen with a kind of just a pathway, basically, with little pins along the pathway, which is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So in between game rounds, you can visualize your progress. And again, you can see, like, I'm here on level 1. This map goes all the way to level 100. And so mentally, you can think to yourself, is that something I want to do? It kind of like adds, even on its own, it adds some kind of like, I guess, like goals, like expectations for you as a player. And in terms of what King did around that, it was, unfortunately, it wasn't a lot. Like, a lot of work went into it, but nothing, they didn't work well when I was there anyway. We're not able to kind of come up with something which really shifted the needle. But if you've ever played, a really interesting example is of a game that came out at the time, was something called Fishdom, which was still Candy Crush type levels, like still match 3, but they replaced the map with a fish tank. And so as you finished a level, you kind of like populated your fish tank with different fish and castles and stuff. And so it changed the metaphor from one of like physical progress along a line, along a path, to building this kind of pleasant thing that you might have, you know, acquiring a digital fish, decorating the thing. And you can see tons of examples of like Homescapes is a similar thing, where it's a big, hey, is that Emily Amphlett? Sorry. Hey, how are
It
you doing?
is.
Talk about candy. That's cool. So yeah, Homescapes is a really nice example of that, where that is, it kind of provides a narrative where you are an individual who has inherited a property and it's all run down. But as you complete the levels, you earn tokens which you can cash in to like decorate a room. And so your progress is kind of manifest in the kind of like renovation of this house. And so you have the double motivation now of, I want to get the house looking nice. Like, there's 20 rooms to decorate, but there's also a narrative alongside of, you've inherited this house and it was, I think it was your grandparents or something like that, and you want to bring it up to speed. So there's like emotional kind of levers in there as well. Like, it's super interesting. It's like, I feel like I'm really rabbiting on that, but I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about the difference between gaming and other B2C apps, in that because gaming doesn't have a practical value to it in the way that, say, Amazon does. So when you go on Amazon, your interaction with it is limited to the purpose that you're trying to fulfill, right? So say you want to buy like a new pair of glasses. You want to get on Amazon, you want to find the glasses, you want to get out of Amazon. It's unlikely that you'll be there more than once a day, and maybe more than a couple of times a week. Whereas with gaming, because there's no practical purpose you're trying to fulfill, actually you could spend 24/7 on there. And so that gives a really kind of, it gives a great opportunity for experimentation and creative expression, because you've kind of got this open-ended experience that you're where you can offer kind of very deep engagement to people, because they're not looking, there's nothing they're looking to kind of complete by that interaction, if you see what I mean. They're just looking to have fun. Does that make
I
sense?
see.
I feel like maybe it doesn't.
No, thanks for bringing it down. I'm not challenging you. I'm just literally trying to understand. And so you're saying that the goal is always important. It doesn't have to look like a saga map or a fish tank, but the goal always helps with not just engagement, but like fun and entertainment.
Yes, exactly. And you see it everywhere now. Like, look at, I don't know, like Strava, as like a fitness app. It kind of uses competition as a motivator, and so you can go for a run, and when you finish, you're like, you are the 7th fastest person on this segment this week, or you beat your personal best time on this segment. Like, it's giving you some type of information which is helping you kind of, if you want to engage in that, like rate your performance and say, next time I want to do better, super interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like on the treadmill, I'm like, oh, I want to do that Andes hike. And then I'm like, do I really want to do? But yeah, I understand that, like the desire to get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a question from another user. Were there any other bold experiments that you wish to carry out, so that could be in the past or in the future?
That's a really good question. And I really like the use of the word bold, because I think that's like fundamental to the approach. Like David Nelson, one of the other co-founders of the experimentation group, one of his key tenets is always that you have to make yourself feel uncomfortable in the experiment that you do. If you're just moving the needle like 5-10%, you're probably not going to learn anything, because it's not enough. You have to double it, like really push it to the point at which you're like nervous that maybe you will crash the game and nobody's going to play it anymore. I think, I don't know, I would say what I'm really excited about, or what has been so fun over the past couple of weeks, is we have spoken to 20 different teams about the challenges that they've got in their games, and every single one of them is unique. And to be honest, I'm excited about every single one. Like, I can't unfortunately go into details of who we've spoken to, but they've all kind of been able to get to a certain point in their game, and now they're a bit like, what do we do next? There's 20 different things we could try. Which one is the one? And I guess that's what I'm kind of most excited about, is being able to kind of collaborate with these people and understand, get into their game, understand what they've learned so far, and help prioritize the next, say, 2-3 things that we try to really like try and kind of get to that nub of what's important, and then share it with the rest of the community, right? Like, I think that's the real secret sauce, is being able to then go out to the rest of gaming, or anybody else that wants to subscribe to our channel on LinkedIn or YouTube, and learn like what's the next goals, like what's the next hard level labeling that we find that you can then apply to your experience.
So it's kind of like a TBD, like you're not going to tell us yet, and you might be in the middle of an experiment, but we should definitely subscribe and find it.
Yeah, I kind of have it. It ended up being a bit of a cliffhanger. Yeah, like that. There's nothing. I guess there's nothing on the table now, which I'm like regretful of not having done. But there's definitely a few discussions where we're talking to really fun games that obviously we have. We play them when the team gets in touch, and you can kind of see like there's the spark of something there. Or we were speaking to somebody today, right, whose game is 10 years old, has had, let me get the numbers right, like 9-digit downloads over its lifespan. So like a massive game, but it's kind of declining, and they don't know what to do next. And it's like, what a cool challenge that is, to kind of take this game, which has been out in the world for so long, and is kind of in danger of becoming like obsolete, and try and like bring it back to its former glory. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question, whoever asked about bold experiments. And I know we haven't answered it yet, but I hope people will continue to ask bold questions, and we will definitely try to give a straight answer. I think, Tom, I'm just going to ask you, for games that feel like they might be disrupted, what are the bold threats out there? For this game, they were probably disrupted the industry back when they started. Now they're getting disrupted by other games. So, for example, Benjamin DeHunt spoke about AI and how it's so taboo to use that in the gaming industry because it could disrupt the gaming industry, just like in Hollywood. But what are the new disruptions to the gaming industry?
I think we're a disruption to the gaming industry.
All right.
Yeah, all right. It's going to take that gauntlet and throw it down. I think that the premise that we're coming out with of being free if you want to share, I think that's like super disruptive of a behavior, of just a weird behavior in the gaming industry, and probably like industry in general, right? Like everybody plays each other's games. Everybody talks to their friends about other games that are out there. People move from one company to another and take their insight from the first to the second company. Like this is all happening, but in a really secretive way. And it kind of, the history of mobile gaming has shown that one person having an idea that makes a ton of money, if somebody copies it, it's a kind of, it's not a zero-sum game. Like everybody can share the benefit of these insights. And so if we as an industry become outward facing and discursive and collaborative about the work that we're doing and the things that we're learning, I think we also then advance more quickly than if we're kind of like guarding our homework and not letting anybody have a look at it. So I think, yeah, I think that's pretty disruptive. Yeah, I would agree. Like AI is just like absolutely massive, and I think I'm personally an optimist on AI. I think I use it every single day to help me kind of write up all the documents and posts and things that I need to do, and kind of all the things that I've never done before. I just get ChatGPT to do it and then pretend that it was my own work. But like, I think that's the way it works, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a threat. I think if it's a kind of, it's almost like a kind of accelerant to us. Like, we can think of it as something to help us be better at what we do rather than making what we do obsolete.
That's a really interesting point, that in gaming, there's a lot of intellectual property, like you're hiding your secrets, but at the same time, anyone can play your game. It's public. So tell me a little bit more about that, because, some of the founders I've talked to are really good at establishing IP patents, because they expect, right, someone is going to copy them. Even investors were like, oh, I'm doing an Gen AI fund and someone just copied me. So it's one way to go the patent route. And, obviously I encourage everyone to do that. But then there are other ways where you collaborate with your competitors because you're making a bigger pie for everyone, and then everything in between. So I listened to this podcast with Kevin Kelly and Andreessen Horowitz. And, Kevin, Raina and I talked on our last podcast about Kevin's theory of the 1,000 true fans. You just need 1,000 people paying you $100 and you got revenue for a whole year, right? So Kevin's new hypothesis is that you should pay your players to play, because then they will increase the virality at the beginning for people who then will pay you to play. So I guess I'm just asking about the pricing model. Like, how is your being free different? than the behavior of incumbents? And what do you think about like paying people to play your game in the beginning?
So I think that the biggest challenge for mobile gaming at the moment is the economics of it.
Yeah.
Since the cookies were wiped out and Apple's privacy drive, like it's become really expensive and difficult to acquire players. And so the challenge is effectively how do you balance your cost of acquisition with your lifetime value of a player? And
Okay.
so if you were to start, I think like paying somebody to play the game kind of like would blow that up like massively. I could imagine it would be like super popular and maybe someone's got to find a way to make it work. But that would be a challenge, I think, for sure. And I think you're also setting you're setting a certain expectation then, aren't you, around the nature of the game? I mean, there are some games where you do like skill gaming is the premise that you kind of place a bet almost on the game you're about to play. It's not unlike paying influencers, says M. Yeah, that's a fair point. That is a fair point. But yeah, so there are like skill games is the kind of premise where you might have a game like a normal free to play game like Candy Crush, but you would effectively like bet. You would be in there with a bunch of other players, and you would lay a stake down and say, "I'm going to pay $1 to play this game," and then the winner takes the pot. The winner takes the dollars who's played it. And so there are kind of examples of games like that. But it's not, I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers of them to see how big they are. But it's kind of, it's certainly not kind of like massive. I think the premise in gaming, at least casual gaming at the moment, is more like the longer you can keep people engaged, the more likely you are to kind of unlock that spend over time. And that actually the spend from a lot of people it's not like a reluctant thing. It's not like, oh, you've trapped me and I'm just going to give you some money. Actually, people want to, in some cases, like spend. It's their way of playing. And we did the experiment at King where we turned pay off. So we made it impossible for people to spend to get the extra moves. And we actually saw churn go up. We actually saw people leave the game because they couldn't spend anymore. And so it's definitely a thing where it's not necessarily like a dirty thing or cheating to spend, or it doesn't have to be a trap or negative. Like it's just some people's like leisure, and just like, you might spend on Netflix or Paramount Plus or whatever. People spend on Candy Crush and Monopoly Go.
Yeah, so Lisa Costavo, who worked at Zynga, she was on the last podcast with me. She published with Near EL this article about Lotto. So, some games, they have an auction at the end, and you think that by bidding, you're getting closer to winning the bid. And that like fuels the lifetime value, right? Like you just want to keep playing and keep playing because you think like you have a chance. So that's one of these pricing models that you're talking about. Is that right? Is that what you meant by your example? Okay. I just wasn't sure. Thank you for educating me. And Emily is saying, I think it would work if there's a business model that's able to think cross currency with crypto. So, like Emily, I totally agree. Like blockchain would support kind of the internationalization of the pricing structure. But I don't know, Tom, if you look, if what you think of that, or does the gaming industry, are they receptive to that? Like, because it seems like there's like big game companies and they kind of want to separate their borders and not collaborate with other game companies. So I'm just curious about the state of the industry.
It's a good question. Like, I'm not that much of an expert on this, so I don't want to kind of come off as if I'm, some kind of like really know what I'm talking about in this sense, but I definitely do know that there have been people working on this kind of Web3 type avatar where you would have a portable identity that you could take between games, which would kind of like resonate with this idea, right? Like you would have some kind of like one single currency which would be valid in Candy Crush and FIFA and Call of Duty and da, 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 da. But like you say, like it's really difficult to get these big companies to play nice in that sense. One, because it's not necessarily in their interest. Like, why would Activision Blizzard want to kind of cooperate with, I don't know, like Ubisoft or somewhere like that? But also because it doesn't always make sense, you know, like the currency, you would then have to balance your currencies across all these games, right? Like it's just creates this like incredibly complex problem where it's like what a gold coin is worth X in Gardenscapes, and then it has to be worth the same thing in Fortnite or something like that. Like it kind of brings a lot of complexity to it. Yeah,
that's a really good point because that's not necessary right now. Like each of these games have a payment structure. They don't need to share it with other companies, and the users create accounts for each of the different games anyway. So
which oftentimes is one of the main levers that you've got to flex is the way you value your currency and what gets released when and how you use that as a motivator for people to buy stuff. Like, and so adding complexity, or I don't know, adding complexity / losing control over that.
Yeah.
Again, is not necessarily something which I'm sure people would be like, there would have to be like a huge benefit for somebody to be like, cool, I'll do that.
I wonder what that benefit is. Anyone in the audience, if you know, or you have, tried those portable avatars, please comment. But we're coming up to the 40-minute mark. So Tom, do you want to share your website, or we can close out by talking about video editing, AI tools that we're both using? What do you prefer?
I'll tell you what I just want to kind of, I guess, like wrap up with a quick pitch for like 30 seconds and then we can talk about video. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
So I think just to be like super clear, the way we're operating is to collaborate with gaming companies for free, right? Like if you're listening or watching and you work for a game company, mobile gaming company, and you've got questions about how do we grow, and you think you might want to try experimentation, then just visit either my profile on LinkedIn or the experimentation group. We've got a business profile on LinkedIn, and we've got a website, the address of which is theexperimentation.group. As long as you've got a mobile game with 10K daily active users or more, you're able to ship an experiment fairly quickly and you're happy to share those results publicly, then we'll work with you for free. Just get in touch and we can work something out. If you don't want to share but you're still interested, we can go the pay route. And that's basically how the business model works. Like we're assuming that not everybody wants to pay to share, and therefore some people will pay, and that's how it all balances out. But yeah, that's it in terms of the pitch. Like if you're interested, please just dig in and get in touch. But yeah, you wanted to talk about video.
So let's gamify this pitch. So what is the goal? Is there a limited time offer?
We kind of phrased it like there is, but there isn't. Like just get in touch. We're happy to speak to anybody, but we are quite busy, I would say, at the moment. So the sooner you put your hand up, the more likely you are to kind of get on the roadmap quickly.
Awesome. Yeah. Everyone get on the roadmap, reach out to Tom or his website, which is scrolling below. And let's talk about, what's that?
It is. I hadn't noticed that. That's cool.
Yeah. I love StreamYard. So let's talk about video editing and AI. I really loved what you said about digital avatars. I've been looking into like, generative video companies because that's where I want to take my podcast and find a job as a product manager. So my tech stack, I've been using video.ai to
Mm-hmm.
edit my videos. I've tried Opus and Clip as well. I think they're not, they're well funded, but they're new. And video is actually an incumbent. They're old and they have like social scheduling in addition to editing and ranking. And they actually have emojis, which I really like the visualization of a
Yeah.
podcast. Like I love emojis. And so I'm also looking at, some new like trailer video creators where they take like text and they create a video from like the trailer text for this podcast. I made a video for you. And now I'm looking into like programmatic digital video fakes. So it takes a basic script and then personalizes it for each user, for each client, if you're B2B. So that's how I see the stack, or that's how I see the players. But tell me, like, what are you using? What have you liked? What haven't you liked?
Well, I'm super new to this space as part of the kind of, I guess, the flywheel of the business is that as we get work with clients and start to share stuff, we obviously want to kind of get as many eyeballs on that as possible. And we have found that YouTube is just amazing for virality in a way that audio podcasts, we just started with an audio podcast, just isn't at all. Audio podcast is just kind of flatlined at quite a small level, whereas YouTube has just gone crazy. And in fact, that's how we were introduced, wasn't it? I did the video podcast back in like August time. And
that's right.
So
that's how I found you. Yeah, we found each other. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I started at the time I was using Veed.io for that, and actually recently I've stopped using it because it's all online. It's very slow and laggy, and it's kind of, I don't know. It felt like a kind of nice starter, like stepping stone to something a bit more complicated. But I don't know. It's doing really well as a business actually, but it's kind of, I struggle to see where it fits. There's so much competition in the space. And the experience in it was not the best. So I just started using Filmora this week, and I'm really enjoying it actually. Like I really love, there's a ton of AI features in there, which are kind of as you would expect at the moment. Like it saves a lot of time, but it's not like out the box, it's perfect. There's still a bit of tweaking that you need to do. But yeah, like it's a great experience. I'm loving it. I guess the frustration that I'm finding, and this is probably me as a noob user, is the kind of various formats you have to produce for, right? Like you make something for YouTube and it's not necessarily going to work on Insta or LinkedIn and it's super time consuming. I feel like there's got to be a fix for that.
Yeah, so I just landed on a square because I'm like, okay, you can turn it like it fits in all the different places with some black stuff on, the top or the side.
That's a good idea.
So StreamYard, actually, I use that for social scheduling because it goes through each of the channels and lets you set your preferences, and then it in one stream goes to the 5 channels that I've set. Versus in like video AI, you set one and you have to schedule it. And then you go back and set YouTube and you have to go schedule it. And I think that's what you're talking about is the time consumption there. You're scheduling 5, one after the other instead of at the same time. I'm just not going to do it, right? Like it just takes so much time. And so that whole cross-platform channel plus your website, I don't know if the Square can solve it, but I hear the problem.
Well, it's the same problem that AI is solving, right? Like there's so much volume of work that you need to do, which can be quite repetitive, right? Like writing another proposal, like already done a bunch. Can't somebody else
Yeah.
just like, can't this robot do it for me, please? And so if there's a way to kind of with content that, as I understand it, the game is like it's not just quality, there's also quantity comes into it massively. And so it's, you know, it's quite easy for suddenly you've lost a whole bunch of time because you've been making you've made like one long form video and 5 shorts that all need to be in different formats. And
Yeah, that's like at least like what, like 30, right? So
I would take any efficiency on that, definitely.
yeah.
Like anything that can save all that kind of laborious time of exporting and formats and that type of thing.
So then the last question we'll then close after this is the AI features on Filmora. I've only used the background removal. So background removal is very easy on images, but when you've got a video of 30 images per second, then it's, you know, you need AI to remove the changes and remove the background. So I'm curious what AI you've used on Filmora so far.
So far, the main thing I've been using is just the subtitles. Like it just whacks the subtitles in, which is a fairly kind of like standard feature, I think. But at the same time, as like a noob to it, I was just like, what? I just push a button and it does it all for me. Like, this is amazing. But I have noticed that with the latest release that came out earlier this week, there was just like a long list of this new thing, AI, this new AI thing, this new AI thing. So yeah, that's my task for Friday. Basically, I'm doing a lot of tutorials and making sure that I'm using this thing correctly and efficiently.
Yeah, let me know what you like, and I'll share my tech stack as it grows and changes as well.
Yeah, for sure. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's it for today.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been really good fun. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for answering the hard questions and just rolling with the punches. So we're all rooting for you and can't wait to find out what experiments you end up running.
All right. Well, we should be talking about it regularly. So if you want to find out, then just jump on follow us on one of the channels, and you'll be inundated with videos about it.
YouTube, right?
Yes, YouTube, but also the LinkedIn channel.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
all right.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom.
See
You
you
can
guys.
stay on. Tom, stay on. I'm going to end the live stream for everyone else, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about editing one of your clips.
All right.